That'd be
And the eardrum. Yes, and the eardrum. Thank you very much.
Well, you have no ears, do you?
Well, there's some left still, a little bit. But I think one of the most important things is the education that we do. When you say that's a big E, a big E is education.
I do think that's the big E. Although I do think the engineer is number one, and then education is right below that. But for some reason, he doesn't have an ego, which is an E, because if he had anything, he would have clapped when we said engineer. But I don't know. Jen used to clap for that, but I don't know. Our new engineer doesn't like that for some reason. We'll have to have a conversation with him afterwards, right, Alex?
Yeah, I think so. He's a little uptight. Is that an E? Oh, I don't think that's an E. Okay, we'll
I think there's an E in newbie, isn't there? Newbie. There's a couple of E's in that one.
A few of them in there. Just one.
Doesn't want to rock the boat. Doesn't want to rock the boat. Do you remember the logarithm, or do we have to go through that one with you? Because I know it's been
I think we'll have to talk about that. So the other E is that we believe that there's enough expertise that's involved. And let's talk about experts. What's an expert there, Peter?
So we determine that typically, if you're working in a regular job, you're working 40 hours a week. You work 50 weeks a year. That's 2,000 hours, approximately. There's always differences. And you work 5 years. That's 10,000 hours. We figure that after doing something for 5 years, you have enough knowledge that you can be considered an expert. Not all the cases, but most of the time. Now, most people...
What if you're an entrepreneur?
Alex,
that
was my lead-in. You just took that away.
I know. I want to throw it out and take it. Just cut you right off. I loved it.
Entrepreneurs, okay, because I'm a New Yorker, okay, that's typically what our guests are. They're entrepreneurs. They've started something. You know what they said? I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to do it myself. I'm not going to be another E called employee with a lot of E's. And what happens there? You know, you work for a living and you have to wait to get paid and wait to get hired and fired. If you're not an employee and you're an entrepreneur, guess what? Well, you're going to take that 10,000 hours, and unless you got lucky in life, you're probably going to be able to do that in 2.5 to 3 years. Most people. Why? They don't have a choice. You may be an expert in marketing. You may be an expert in law. You may be an expert in website development. The reality is, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to do a little bit of everything. And guess what? When you do a little bit of everything, you become an expert in what, Alex? Nothing. So therefore, we have to really, it's really hard for the entrepreneur because there's so many things. I mean, many people are entrepreneurs, and they said, well, I can sell well and I can build a great product, so I'm set, right? And then they don't understand, what do you mean accounting? What do you mean I thought the books were done. What are you talking about, cash flow, Or then you have the other people that, hey, I'm an accountant. Oh, I know everything about money and finance, whatever. And then at the end of the day, but you don't have any inventory, you don't have a product, and nobody wants to buy it. Now what are you going to do? You can add up all day. You can cut costs all you want, but guess what you're going to have? Not much. So E's are very, very, very important. Today's session, though, we're going to be talking a lot about education on a concept called AI. Now, I don't know what AI means. Is that two vowels in our alphabet, right? That's what AI is, right?
Yeah.
But Alex,
yeah.
What is AI?
Well, I think most people have heard the term over and over again, but it really means artificial intelligence. And we all think of iRobot as the first one, the 3 rules of robotics, and they were all intelligent. But really, there's AI is kind of interesting because people think it isn't what it is, and they're all scared of it because of sci-fi. But there's been 3 stages of AI developed or that people have come up with. And let me run through those real quick because it's really important because we're in the first stage.
What about
computers? Yes, computers aren't intelligence or tools. AI is a tool, but AI can think for itself theoretically, or at least it can make decisions. The first stage of AI is what we call, I think we call it ANI, which is narrow intelligence, artificial narrow intelligence. This is kind of like the first thing that IBM did when they taught a computer to play chess. That was the first incident we ever saw of that. And, it was like Beat the Chess Masters. IBM had a product that I'm not going to say the name because it's registered, but IBM had a product and their big multi CPU computer that took up a room, similar to the Whopper in war games. It was this huge computer, and it basically was able to beat chess masters. And that was the first part of where we were today and what we often call artificial narrow intelligence. But we also think we're beyond that, but we really aren't. We're still in that stage because the next one that we really talk about is what we call AGI, and I like that one because the AG, it works out really well.
Adjusted gross income.
Yeah, really. There you go.
AGI.
But the general intelligence is basically something that's really cool. I mean, this is when machines would actually understand what you're saying. So you could say something in a machine and it would understand it rather than just react to it. Now, a lot of times, and we'll talk about this a little later, is when you use something like ChatGPT and you put something into ChatGPT such as make me a contract to sell my house. And ChatGPT goes off and it gives you a contract. Now, did it really understand what you said, or did it just execute something that you wanted? So that's really where we get small range of tasks, and basically something that's there. Now, I have a lot of background with Apple, as you remember, Peter. It's really good. And Wozniak came up with this thing called the coffee test to tell if you were at AGI yet. And I know, Peter, you're a fan of those Elon Musk robots that he has, the Tesla robots now. I know you're.
I'm building my own army.
You're going to order one of them. I'm going to have my own army of robots. I like that. I like that. Yeah, those are good. But Wozniak had a thing called the coffee test. I always thought it was pretty cool. He said before a robot or AI can be what we consider general intelligence, is they have to be able to make a cup of coffee. So you basically would stick them in a kitchen. They would have to find the coffee machine, add the coffee, add the water, and make you a cup of coffee that tasted good. When that happens, that means AI has hit general intelligence. Now, a lot of people talk about the Turing test and other things, but I think that's the coolest thing. If your Tesla robot you can sit that robot in your kitchen, it can find your coffee, make your coffee, then it's reached general intelligence.
So if Starbucks...
And it can run for Senate probably, or Congress. Well.
So if Starbucks creates a robot barrister to make you your coffee, we're there.
Well, not quite, because it has to find it. Has to go into your kitchen and do it.
They made the coffee.
Yeah. That's true. And then a lot of people will say, well, where's the next one, which is ASI, which is artificial superintelligence. And that's really, we think of iRobot, and we think of all these TV and sci-fi and Skynet and everything else, right? Where these things, it's just a cognitive performance of humans, or beyond cognitive performance of humans, because the data set that the AI can access is greater. So, we talk about AI, we talk about things called large language models and large data sets. Is that AI has an advantage over a human, is that the human would have to go and Google something or read some books or watch some videos or whatever to learn about a subject, where AI would have it instantaneously accessible. Everything that's ever been published, everything that's ever been done would be accessible to AI, and AI would just be able to take that and make its own decision of what that means. Similar to, the war games proposition, similar to Skynet ending the world, all these things that we think about. How far away are we? Well, I'm not going to go there, but people will argue that it's a better life if you can just have humans do none of the work and AI does all the work. But also you lose, what we like to talk about, entrepreneurship and the drive to do new things and develop new things and build new things. So those are kind of the stages of AI that people need to understand.
Well, when I think of the Whopper, besides Burger King, you can have your own way. But besides that Whopper, I'm also usually, from what I remember about that movie, mostly was tic-tac-toe.
There you go.
You can play tic-tac-toe forever. you have to have a minimal skill, but you can play it forever. I mean, if
Is
you're
that better than thermonuclear war? I'm not sure. I think thermonuclear war
and that
was
movie was global thermonuclear war, is that called? Global thermonuclear warfare.
Yeah.
But
well, I try not to about that.
But one point I want to get into, and this is that there's a certain level of intelligence, right? And you're saying that AI has a certain level of intelligence by looking up everything that's ever been done in past history, and that's your premise. That's your minimum point. My question is, when can AI, create their own new points, their own new things, without having to rely on the past? That's my question. Where is that point? Is that the last
that's what we call generative AI, and we have that to a certain extent today. So generative AI is a term that they've been trying to use in order to sell AI to a lot of people. And what they're saying is that AI can look at what's been done in the past, and it can look at what things should be, and it can generate them. And you see paintings, music, videos, all generated by AI based on prompts. And the question is it a spark of what they've learned or what they've seen and they're copying, or is it something new that they generate? And the interesting part about that, Peter, is that there's two schools of thought on this. There's a couple of rules, but two schools of thought. One is that the way humans learn is they learn by seeing, and then they adapt what they've seen to what they want. So that's the first way of learning, right? There's also what's called pattern recognition, which is something I don't love the way they're teaching in school. I mean, we used to learn how to sound out words by phonics. Today they sound out words by showing them a picture. So here's a picture of a car. You say car. That's how you learn that word. That's the way computers work, not the way humans actually work. Some educators believe that's the exact way it should happen, but that's the way computers learn. So they learn by looking at that. This is a picture of a car. This is a picture of a dog. This is a picture of a cat. Now they know what those things are. Generate a dog cat. They take the dog and the cat and they blend them together and they go, here it is. They don't know you probably shouldn't do that. In the Frankenstein world, it's probably a bad thing to do.
So do you have a dog cat?
That you can consider a dog cat or a cat dog. And that could be considered generative AI at that point. They do that with pictures. If you've seen some of the pictures that AI generates, they don't make any sense in our logical world because we use frame of references. We can look at things and say, this is what a tree looks like. You can ask them to do something that doesn't look like a tree, and they'll give you something that looks really strange. And a lot of people have done this. There's a lot of people play hours and hours and hours with ChatGPT, ask it to come up with certain things, and some of it's pretty bizarre. Some of the music, though, doesn't seem very generative. It seems like copies, but a lot of it is out there. And believe it or not, I think I had read, and don't hold me this, but I read that 60% of all the new music on Spotify is AI generated. Now, it doesn't mean it gets a lot of play, but it is AI generated. This is also true with videos and things as we talk about marketing. We'll talk about that. But, yeah, there's a lot of generative AI out there already. It doesn't mean that it still means it's narrow intelligence. It doesn't mean it's general intelligence because AI still has to figure out what to do with that once it builds it. So this is one of the interesting things is that AI can build certain things, but it doesn't know how to use them. And that's a really interesting thing.
So we only have 5 minutes, and we're going to take a little bit of time to go over both law and marketing today. The first question is, you had some questions about contracts or something. Well, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I look at AI always in how it works and how we use it mostly in advertising and marketing and other areas. But I want to ask you a couple questions about that. So I spend a lot of money in my business on standard business stuff, on contracts, being able to build quotes. I do quotes. I need to do purchasing. I need to figure out, what I sold, what I purchased, and AI can somewhat help me with that. It can look and look at the analytics of things and say, well, you sold 20 of these last quarter, and you're probably going to sell 20 this quarter, but last year this time you only sold 10, so maybe this is seasonality. It'll figure these things out. And that, I can figure out for myself. Where it's harder is, well, I want to build a contract. I want to buy something, and I want to make sure I have a contract to buy it. And in the past, I used to have a good friend who's an attorney, and I just run it by him, and I'd say, well, I need a contract. Or I'd go online and I'd Google it, and I'd find a contract that I liked. Either I'd buy it, or I would acquire it if it was free, and I would just make changes. But now with AI, I can just go to ChatGPT and say, I'm buying this. Give me a contract to buy it. So how does that work when you're talking about that, Peter? Is that legal?
Well, first of all, let's talk about, there's so many subjects in there, and I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this in 5 minutes. ChatGPT is a company. It's almost like a new language, right? That was created by a software developer. Okay, and they did not attend law school. And I'm not trying to say lawyers are something superhuman, whatever. But the reality is that when people go to law school, they read cases, they read information, they learn different things in law school. Okay, and it's that knowledge and ability how to analyze and use those things that can create good contracts. Now, you can go online even before AI and just go online, hey, I need a contract. I'll just grab one from Google or something because they have a team of lawyers there, and they probably did a halfway decent job, and they probably have it. The thing is, every contract reality is there's a different contract for every single event. Now, certain items should go into every contract, but you don't even know why they're there. For instance, a good example is an attorney fee clause. So some contracts have an attorney fee clause that says that the prevailing party in a lawsuit, if there's a breach, in other words, somebody did not follow through on the contract, if there's a breach, that the prevailing party shall receive attorney fees. Okay? Now, that is not in every single contract. Some people put it in contracts, some people don't. There's an analytical part to do it and a determination. What does that mean? Well, the analytical part is we have to decide, and we may have to do this when we come back, but we have to decide, all right, who's more likely to breach, right? Let's do a franchise agreement, all right? Let's have a franchise agreement. Alex bought a McDonald's franchise, okay? An attorney fee clause there, the franchisor may have it there because they say, hey, listen, we're going to be able to collect attorney fees on top of everything else if they breach, and we're going to be in a very strong position. The franchisee won't want to take that on, right? But it could be reversed. What if the franchisee is suing McDonald's? Now McDonald's is at risk. So McDonald's has to decide if they're going to write the contract, and whoever drafting the agreement will make that determination. But they have to decide, is it worth it to put it in there? Why? Because we don't want a lot of franchisees suing us, because if the franchisees do sue us and we're going to have to pay their attorney fee, it's going to get very expensive. So we want to deter that. So there are reasons positive and there are reasons negative. So somebody has to make those determinations. When you're looking at a contract online, there's an analysis that has to be done, and it's an analysis of that specific circumstance. Whatever business you have, whatever vendor you have, it may want to go one way or the other, and we don't know that. Now, we have to take a quick break. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. We'll be right back. Go ahead.
You're good, man. Thank you. Yeah, I do, and I'm just excited because you brought up a whole bunch of points here, and I'm going to take the AI side of it. I could ask ChatGPT while we're on break, but I didn't. But I'll take the AI side of it a little bit. So, as an attorney reads a lot of books. AI reads every book, so they probably know more than you do. They have instant recall. They know everything. But the question that I always ask myself, and I know the answer myself in this, but I have to ask you, is with AI, do they know what the best interest of the client is? So here's the thing where I think it's going to separate ANI from AGI, what we talked about, narrow intelligence from general, is that AI can't ask you those questions that you've been trained as an attorney to ask the client, because AI can only take the prompt from the client. I need a contract, but it isn't saying I need a contract that protects me from this and protects me from that. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with that to a certain extent, but I want to back up a little bit here on something you said about this whole AI concept. The reality is that there are plenty of people that have gone to school, and I've gone to schools with people that graduate valedictorian, first in their class, okay? And they take the test that they have to take, and they're number one on the test, and they accomplish what they want. But they have a photographic memory, similar to an AI, and they don't know how to think or create or analyze that situation into something. And that's the ability to think, okay? And that's why until AI gets to that stage, a lot of areas aren't going to have to worry about it. It's good for repetition. It's good for the same thing over and over again. And yes, it can read many, many books. The reality is, do you think that AI can read every single book? No. Even ChatGPT, they probably have it geared towards certain areas, certain things that the coder has determined, okay? That's why I don't believe that's as big a problem for society in the sense of, we're going to replace all these type of jobs. It's really going to take a lot longer because it has to get to the next stage where it's actually taking that information and then analyzing it and creating something. And one, two, for instance, like a lawyer. When a lawyer goes to court, they may have a case there, and they may have 50 precedents over the case. But the reality is it's persuasiveness to the judge, persuasiveness to a jury, which is an emotional aspect. There is no emotional aspect to AI. It is more of a mental aspect. And so you have a mentalization, not a mentalization, a mental way of doing things. And yes, so it can create certain arguments, and create certain contracts. But there's the emotional part that's not there. And that's where, until they get to that level, that's going to create a whole new thing.
Well, last point on that, and you're right. The difference between an AI and machine learning is that machine learning learns what you have, and it takes that knowledge and applies that knowledge. Artificial intelligence in an ANI takes that knowledge of what it's learned, and it ascertains what that knowledge means and relates it to a particular situation. So if it's trained to ask the right questions, it will go and get the answers. And I used to, I'm not an attorney, but I watch a lot of TV. And often on television, which is always, or the movies, which are always 100% correct, right? They're always perfect. They will always say, I'm going to state case law from, Frank versus Harry, 1947 or whatever. So AI will have all that knowledge. So if you're stating case law, you're gonna win. But you're telling me that there's a certain amount of addressing the jury and using certain psychological premises in order to win a case or not that AI can't do. I think that's where you're kind of going at today, right? It doesn't have the personality.
I definitely think that, and that is obviously more in a lawsuit litigation aspect as opposed to a situation that we're talking about here, which is just a contract, right? And again,
right.
Not every contract, Alex, is on the internet. Okay, so what is AI or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, wherever? It's again, what information resources? You're making a very big presumption, and what I believe is way too broad, that it can have every case, that it can have every contract. The amount of time that it will go through. Have you ever done a search on even a document that you pull up that's 25 megabytes, whatever? It takes a lot of time to go through that. Okay, you need the processing time to go through all these things, and not every contract is online. I mean, I think you have a company, as I recall. I don't believe your contract is online. Maybe if you have a website e-commerce part, but you don't have all your contracts online. My law office, for confidentiality purposes, I can't take my clients' contracts and put them online. Now, so the other thing is, what universe of documents is AI looking at? It can't look at everything. That's a dreamsicle concept. Like, I'm going to be a millionaire tomorrow if I do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and I know we're beating the attorney piece to death, but the the interesting part there is that some of that is true and some of that is false, right? Most of contracts are iterative and they're copies from something else. So what is the source document they're copied from? AI generally will find most of those source documents that matter. So the question is what matters and what doesn't matter, and how important is that? So it really, we're at the beginning. We're at the first stage here. We're going to other stages, and everything eventually will be online or accessible to these models. And they learn from their mistakes, which is another problem, because if they make a mistake for you, you become one of the beneficiaries of their learning, but you also probably will be the beneficiary of their mistake as well. So that's another piece you have to think about. So I think the consensus here is that it probably works good enough for a lot of things, but if your life or your livelihood or your business are depending on them, it's probably not the best course of action.
What I say is it's a starting point, right? It's a starting point, but it's not an end point. And on top of that, for instance, there are new businesses that come about all the time. Even AI or EV, they didn't have that 25 years ago. There wasn't an EV charger. Maybe there was. I don't know about it, but it wasn't really, really prevalent, and it wasn't really, really out there. And so, that's a big feature. Contracts themselves, again, you have to make that determination, just like we said when I ended the show last time on the attorney fee clause, right? There are reasons why a franchisor would want it, and there are reasons why a franchisor would not want it. And so there has to be a balancing. And how are you going to do the balancing? You're going to look at, okay, I'm going to look at every single franchise agreement that's out there. Well, guess what? I hate to tell you, but not everything is registered, even though it should be. There are people that don't register things. And then another point I want to make is, you don't know if a contract is good or not until it's challenged in court.
Right.
And so if you're working on a contract that's never been challenged, you don't know if it's going to be accepted by a judge or not. The judge may say, oh, this is an invalid clause. And so if you're copying or if it's using information that hasn't even gone to court yet, you don't know how good it is. So there's a lot of things out there. It's like surgery, okay? So I guess something could read all the surgical books and know how to do a surgery, but even in the robotic surgeries that we're doing today, there are humans behind that. It's not the robot just doing it themselves. Okay, hey, Alex, Peter, we're gonna remove your spleen. Just sit there and, right? It doesn't work that way. There are humans
take your best shot.
Exactly. But we got to take a quick break because our show is sponsored by Legal Steps with a Z, and we're going to have a word from our sponsor. So take it away, 88.1 FM. We're going to continue our discussion on AI. All right, Alex, you've been asking a lot of questions. Now I want to ask you some questions because you have an extinguished, and that's also in the extinguished, not distinguished, background in sales and marketing. And obviously, you were the guy that was selling, probably printers, in the 1980s or whatever, and, they were real printers, whatever. Nowadays, things have changed. And so I'm trying to understand, how is AI affecting the marketing, advertising, sales processes?
Well, that's a big, like you said, it's a big subject, but let's talk about that a little. Yeah, I got 5 minutes. Let's take it kind of from the beginning, right? There's every good marketing and advertising campaign, or everything you do in marketing and advertising has to be integrated. So for the longest time, we talked about an integrated marketing plan, one that takes all the aspects of your business, and from your sales aspects and training your salespeople and having scripts and doing those other things, to all of the type of marketings that you would do, all the way from print advertising to radio and television advertising to social media, and a lot of different social media aspects in there. Not to mention all the other components that go along with it, which are really the most important part of the ecosystem, which are generally knowing your audience. It's all about statistics and understanding your audience, right? Analytics, being able to understand the efficiency at which you can test. You and I had talked about A/B testing, and understanding how you test against your audience, and then analytics, understanding where you're spending your money, understanding your demographics, understanding what you're doing, and also to a certain extent, the personalization of your brand, building your brand. Brand is really all important. So what AI has done, AI has sold the concept of efficiency, is that you can, in a very, well, let's put it this way, there's three levels of this that most people have. The general AI level, where AI does everything for you. You do very similar or simple keywords, and then AI generates a campaign for you. I can tell you that in general, those do not work. They're very poor, and there's indications that's just on its way out. The second way that people use AI in most of marketing is just on the back end. So I need to know my analytics. I need to know my demographics. I need to know what my audiences are buying, what my competitors are doing, and I'm going to physically copy them. And then the third way is a totally integrated package, which is getting much more more popular, where AI will ask you a series of questions and you answer them. And a lot of times, what you can do as a small, medium-sized company, you'll usually, if you were doing it the traditional way, you would hire someone to write your copy, or you'd use an external copywriter. You'd use someone who does graphical layout, both in video and in static publishing for layout that you'd use in ads and other campaign parts. And then you would have someone who would be a social media manager. And what most people have done today is AI takes all those functions and it asks you a series of questions, and you talk for maybe 1 hour to 4 hours per month, and AI generates campaigns from what you said, because you're actually giving them information about your business and about what you do. And that's what's generally happening today. And to a certain extent, it's effective, but it's ineffective. And what the reason I say that is that we have social media. I have to be careful I say this because I don't want to make people upset here. We have certain social media where people are very low information and are very quick 8-second, 10-second ads that people will run. They get that information, then they dig deeper into it, and a lot of times the AI will be inaccurate. It'll be derivative, and in some cases it's misleading. But people will buy into it. It's the same thing as before it was Epic, diet pills, right? Every diet pill in the world said you lose 20 pounds in 10 days, and no one would recognize you anymore. Now that was not necessarily truth in advertising. Now with those Epic and those type of products, GP1 products, maybe that is true. But in the old days it wasn't, and it was a typical example of false advertising, if you want to look at it like that. And AI does a lot of that. AI is very derivative and very, very wrong, but it's very hard for some people to spot AI, and they can't tell the difference between, although there's a few very easy ways to tell. Peter, we talked about this, AI writing copy and identifying that copy and where that copy is wrong in some cases, and, responsibility of having to read it. You've seen AI copy a lot, right, Peter?
We have to take a quick break, so we're going to be right back. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. We'll be right back.
It's somewhat generative, but it's also repetitive, and you have to check it. And so there's a lot of people being a little disingenuous out there selling the concept that AI can replace your entire marketing department, build your entire campaigns, and be more successful than you could if you did it yourself. Now, that's true. If you're uneducated in the market, it's like me trying to be an attorney, I probably wouldn't do a good job. But if you know what you're doing, you're going to get it. But you still have to read all the content, because the content is derivative and it's not always correct. In fact, most of the time it's not correct. I run into this in my business. There are people who are publishing catalogs now, and they're online. And a lot of these catalogs are based on pulling information about products from their previous catalogs, but also from competitors. And I look at them and I have to laugh. You get in the middle of a paragraph and it completely comes from somewhere else. and you know right away it's AI generated, which is a question I get all the time. How do you know if the content's been AI generated? And Peter, do you know there are AI generated books now that you can buy on Amazon?
I
Completely
did not know,
AI generated.
It doesn't surprise
100%.
me.
And there's an easy way to tell. If you're looking for a subject and you see books that are sponsored and they have and you read them, you can always read a little of the book, and you read it and it looks like it's a little weird written, a little weird, has a lot of M dashes, probably doesn't have perfect pronunciation, but the words just don't feel right to you. It's that uncanny valley that you get like on video when you look at something that's a CGI and it doesn't look just perfect. You're like, I know this looks good, but it's not great. You get that feeling. Often what you can do is you just say, is that AI? Grab that content out of there, run it through an AI tester, and it'll tell you whether it's AI generated or not. I do that on all content. When someone sends me a letter,
tester?
Oh, no, you can just Google that. Just say detecting AI content, and you'll find a whole bunch of free testers. I use like Grammarly and a couple of the others. And these testers online will allow you to grab that content, throw it in there, and it'll give you a pretty good idea whether it's AI generated or not. A lot of times I'll get letters from suppliers, and they'll have promotions or information. I'll look at that, and I'll go, I think that's been AI generated. That content, I don't know if I believe it all. Throw it in the little tester. Boom, it'll come up, and most of the time it'll say 90% AI. In fact, I just recently worked with someone who had a series of letters done for their company that were going out, I think, as emails to their customers. Emails that went out to their customers. And I ran this through the AI generator, and it said 90% AI. And they were paying. I mean, do you believe this person was actually paying an ad agency to generate these for them? And all they were doing was using AI. And the reason it was 90% is because someone went in there and touched it up a little bit, which is what people will do because AI is usually not perfect. They'll go in and make that little change. But ultimately, it's kind of sloppy and easy, and it's very derivative. You know what I mean, Peter? It's just not good.
I've never heard about that before, but that's an interesting concept and an interesting person that you're working with. Let's go further, though. And unfortunately, we only have a minute left, so we're going to have to kind of wrap this up. Why don't you name 5 places that people can go for these tools so that we have an understanding? People can do that on their own. We're going to do more shows on this, but what tools can they have to check to see whether it's AI?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few that you can kind of look at. GPT-0 is one of them. It's a free tester that you can check to see if the content was generated in ChatGPT, which is where most of it comes from. Let's see. CopyLeaks is another free one that I've used before, and that'll tell you. Yeah, copyleaks.com. There's a couple others. I use Grammarly. Grammarly is pretty good. Those are the ones I would probably recommend for most people to be able to use. And, the other thing you do, again, ask ChatGPT, believe it or not, ask them, is this content been created by AI? And it'll actually tell you for the most part. Because it'll look at other large language models and say, hey, yeah, this was done that way. So, yeah, there's a lot there. And I think it's really important from a place to start. And we should talk way more about how you can use it or not use it. But for the first place is identifying AI is going to be important, whether you trust it or not.
Wow. Thank you very much, Alex. Unfortunately, our show has come to an end. I know people are crying, oh, my God, we're not going to hear Peter and Alex. But unfortunately, the show is over. We are going to continue to do more shows on AI, more shows on trying to help business owners learn something about business so that they can be the best they can be entrepreneurs. Anyway, that's our show. Thank you, Alex. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. Until the next show, goodbye. Over and out.